I cannot tell you how many times I've read 1 Corinthians 13 at weddings. It's not hard to understand why. Paul's magnificent language describing love provides as good a start to married life as any words in the Bible. But I wonder how many people realize that Paul's words are spoken to a congregation in conflict. There is a certain irony, therefore, when we read 1 Corinthians 13 at weddings. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Friday, April 1st, 2021. In my experience, we in the church read 1 Corinthians 12 and 1 Corinthians 13 at different times. We read from 1 Corinthians 12 and marvel at Paul's words about spiritual gifts. We often read these words at ordinations. We read from 1 Corinthians 13 and we marvel just as much as his language about love, and we read that at weddings. But we typically read these chapters separately from one another, which really does a great disservice to both chapters. In today's reading, which is suggested in the daily lectionary for morning prayer, we read the end of chapter 12 and the beginning of chapter 13, which makes a nice bridge between the two chapters, tying them together when we usually divide them up. Recall that 1 Corinthians is a letter in which Paul addresses a variety of conflicts that exist within the Corinthian church. Now, in chapters 11 through 14, Paul is in the midst of a long discourse about the conflicts the Corinthians are experiencing regarding worship, from proper headwear for men and women, to the conduct of the Lord's Supper, to the place of the various spiritual gifts that people have, whether some are superior to others. The Corinthians just couldn't see eye to eye. Yesterday, we read Paul's analogy of the church to a body, in which all parts are necessary. Today, Paul completes this analogy and then attempts to place these conflicts in a larger context, one in which any remaining disagreements will become less acute. So here's what Paul has to say. Now, you are the body of Christ, and individually members of it. And God has appointed in the church first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then deeds of power, then gifts of healing, forms of assistance, forms of leadership, various kinds of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all possess gifts of healing? Do all speak in tongues? Do all interpret? But strive for the greater gifts, and I will show you a still more excellent way. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast but do not have love, I gain nothing. As you can see, Paul changes his tune here just a little bit. Before this, he has argued that all spiritual gifts are equal. Now he admits that there is somewhat of a hierarchy of gifts, though he's careful not to imply that those who possess those gifts are somehow spiritually superior to others. He lists in order apostles, prophets, teachers, workers of power, those who heal, those who assist others, those who lead, and lastly, those who speak in tongues. This is a subtle dig at those in the Corinthian church who believe that their ability to speak in tongues marked them as spiritually superior. But in Paul's list, it falls only as number 8. Certainly not the most important gift of all, let alone a gift that marks anyone as superior. Now Paul turns to what he calls a more excellent way. But before I continue, it is worth noting that chapter and verse numbers were not in Paul's original letters. Same really for all the books of the Bible. Chapter and verse numbers were added much later as a sort of shorthand to make it easy for people to communicate with each other by referencing chapter and verse number so people could be on the same page, as it were. Notice that nowhere in the Bible, when writers quote other parts of the Bible, do they refer to chapter and verse. This convention was not in common use until about the 12th century, and the current numbering system only appeared in, get this, 1557. I mention this because the convention of chapters and verses can fool us into thinking that each chapter introduces a new thought. But if you read Paul's original letter, there would have been no such division between Paul's discussion of spiritual gift and the discussion of love. It's all one extended thought. It is easy to see, therefore, that when Paul talks about love as that more excellent way, he's really trying to convince the Corinthians that when they try to claim superiority based on the gifts they possess, they're missing the point. Spiritual gifts are not about status. They are for the upbuilding of the whole body. They are gifts people have to give to one another. Tongues without love? Meaningless. Prophecy without love? Pointless. The great Duke Ellington composed a tune with lyrics by Irving Mills that included the memorial line, "It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing." Paul might say, "It don't mean a thing if it ain't got no love." Tomorrow, we'll read the entire 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians and think about how it might have been received by those cantankerous Corinthians. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.